So we came back to the block. You see, Carlos did an excellent job. He painted it and cleared it. Everything's nice and clean. Everything's ready. We knocked in new cam bearings. We didn't put that in camera because it was kind of a hassle at the time, to be honest with you. But if you need help, you know, knocking cam bearings in, that's honestly a little bit more advanced. And this video is actually just for like a quick rebuild. So most of the time you have a machine shop go ahead and do that for you. Normally it doesn't cost too much money, and plus you need special tooling. So for most people, unless you're gonna be doing a lot of them, it's there's no need to carry the tooling for it or whatnot. Just having a local machine shop do it. It costs you less than $100, and that'd be it. And if you have the tool, most likely you know how to do it anyway. So again, we knocked new cam bearings in. The block has been cleaned and prepped. Now we're just gonna put the bearings in it. We just got a D and J rebuild kit, master re-ring kit. So it comes with rings, all the bearings, all the gaskets, all the seals. If you hear it a little bit in the background, Carlos is cleaning the main caps, getting the main caps ready. And I'm gonna take my gloves off so I can get up and close and personal with this engine. And we'll start putting the bearings in it and go from there. So I'm starting with the center bearing, which on an LS is your thrust bearing. You want the one with the holes in it. The one with the holes in it is gonna be your where it goes to the block, right? So the matches with the oil galleries in here. So you get the bearing, match the orientation, you press it in flat, and you'll see that the center oil hole will match in. There'll be a groove. This bearing is reversible, could go either way, and that's it. The thrust bearing's in place, and then the rest of the bearings are fairly straightforward. So you got the rest of the bearings here. Again, you'll see it has two holes in it, and you'll have a tab, and the tab will only be on one side for the rest of the bearings. So there's gonna be a groove, and just line the groove up. I'll just set it in place on each one.
Did I do that?
Everything looks good. Right. You really don't want to nick a bearing or anything like that, because obviously that's not good. You want to make sure the surface that you're pressing the bearings into is clean. You know, you don't want to have grime or whatever, or feel like a crunch sound whenever you push the bearings in place because it's dirty. Should go in nice. Alright. Press everything down. Again, this slid into the grooves. These are really hard to get wrong. If you get these wrong, you deserve a medal. It's supposed to slide into the groove. So this is in place. Now, most importantly, you can't put this together dry. You gotta put some assembly lube, especially for when you for first startup. And while you're assembly, you're gonna be turning things. So a good assembly lube is important. And actually, you know, kind of crucial. It's gonna make things tighter now when you use assembly lube. So when you go to spin the motor over, it's probably not gonna spin as freely or as it would. But after the engine runs and everything gets flushed out with the oil, it's gonna spin. The motor will spin a lot more easier. You'll find. All right, we got everything lubed. So previously we polished all the journals in the crank. Let me get the crank quick. Wipe down on all the mains. Quick wipe down and pop it straight down in place. Boom. Give it a little dab of lube on top. Lubricate the whole surface by spinning a little bit, and we'll start putting the main caps in it. Start with the center, number 3. All right, these all they're marked, and they are also directional. So, all right, number 3, the number will be facing towards the driver's side of the crank. And again, number 3 will also have the thrust bearing. So it will have this bearing in place. We'll slide in place. Add a little lube. And make sure the 3 is going forward. Alright, and I get my hammer. And using the butt end, just tap it in. All right, and I'll do the same with the rest of it. Okay, you may not have noticed on the film, but it's been a few days since we last recorded, and right now the crank is in place. We have all the bolts, just snugged in place, and now we're gonna torque everything. I just want to reiterate, in case I didn't do it prior, of the orientation of the caps. On the driver's side of the block, the numbers will go 1, 2, 3, 4, and on the passenger side, the number 5 will be. So again, that's something to pay attention to, because if you put the caps in wrong, the crank is not going to spin freely, and you don't want that. Good thing for LS engines, you don't need a big torque wrench. You're just going to need a pry bar but you'll need a smaller torque wrench that will read pretty low, that will read inch pounds, so that you could get the first torque, and then you're gonna need a torque angle gauge that's gonna look like this, and this will get you your final torque back to spec. So we're gonna start out, and I'll count it out with you, and we go from there. So your first torque is gonna be 15 foot-pounds, and that's gonna go for the inside and outside here. And we're gonna torque, and then each one, and then we're gonna go add on the inner bolts. We're gonna add 80 degrees. On the outside bolts, we're gonna add 53 degrees. So a conversion into inch pounds is going to be 180 inch pounds. So that's 15 foot-pounds of torque converted. The reason why you want to use a smaller torque wrench is most half-inch drive torque wrenches do not go down that low. So you do here is torque it down. Alright, we got 15 foot-pounds on that one.
This is...
Yeah. And we come here, we're set at 0, and we're gonna bring this over to 80 foot-pounds. I mean, 80 degrees. I'm trying not to be in the way of the camera here. So that's 80 degrees. We mark that one so we know that we did. And we're gonna go down the line and do bouncing all the inside ones. So we're gonna do this one next. Then we'll hop over, do this guy, do this guy, do this guy, do this guy, until we done all the inside bolts.
Few moments later.
Okay, we're about to do the side bolts. Unfortunately, our inch-pound torque wrench only goes up to 200 inch-pounds. So, and our half-inch drive torque wrench goes to the lowest it will go to is 20 foot-pounds. The side bolts have to go to 18 foot-pounds of torque. So my solution is to use the half-inch drive with an extension, which will kill the torque a little bit, and hopefully at 20 foot-pounds, and hopefully it'll get us right exactly where we need to be. This is like a little, there's a calculation that you could do. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I think we'll be fine, you know. You don't feel comfortable doing this, then find the right torque wrench for your application. Alright. And we're going back and forth in a crisscross pattern. Alright, and that's it. Your main is in place. Alright. So after you have the crank in place, just find a good spot just to just rock the crank forward and back a little bit. On these cranks, I mean, the journals are fairly tight. You ain't gonna get a lot of movement, but it helps center the center thrust bearing. You want to spin it. Make sure you got freedom of movement, and we'll clean up the rod journals and start knocking pistons in it. Alright, so we got everything flipped over. We're ready to throw some of our rods and pistons and rods in it. Now, some housekeeping, or I don't know what you want to call it, whatever. But LS rods and pistons are centered rods, so there really isn't no wrong way to put them in. That being said, I won't put them all piston dimple facing forward and the rod dimple facing backwards. On older, like small block Chevys, they are directional and you can't mix them up side by side. Same thing with forwards. So, but on these LS applications, it doesn't matter. And again, that being said, I'm still going to put them in a certain way because, well, that's how I'm going to do it. Obviously, we can't put it in without rings. So, no, we wipe down the piston, and we got our first ring for the ring pack. I checked these rings already. Now, this is where you will differ depending on the type of build that you're going to be doing. If you're going to hit this with nitrous or any type of boost, this is where you'll cut the rings accordingly. Being that this is just going to be a stock replacement motor and with a cam, we're not going to go too crazy, and the stock ring gap is going to be suffice for this application. If you're building a naturally aspirated motor, you know, a tighter ring gap will also probably be good for that application. Now, if you're going to run any types of nitrous or boost, then you're going to want to open up the ring gap accordingly. On some boosted application, they don't even really care. They open up 35 thousandths, and you just want to keep those rings from touching under load. But again, this is going to be a little daily driver application. So when you put the center ring, you want the split to be pointing upwards, right? So the top of the piston, you set that in place. And whenever I put rings in place, I always start from the bottom and work our way up. I got gloves on. I'll probably take these gloves off. It's a little cold in here. We're in the northeast, and today's probably a good 30 degrees. So it's a little cold, even though we're inside the shop, and we had to shut off the heat so that you guys could hear us talk. So we got the first ring, and then after we set all the rings, then that's where I'll set up the orientation. So, alright, you got those rings set up there. Then we'll put our second ring. Again, and these engine tech kits actually come numbered, so I mean, it's foolproof. But the second ring and this ring pack is a cast. It is also important to check and see if the rings are directional, like this one right here. So wherever the mark is, that's the direction. This one has a little dimple. The dimple wants to be facing upward. On the oil shedding ring here pack, that doesn't matter. Normally there's no dimples or marking, but check with your rings. Who knows? Depending on your application. But for LS applications, generally, you just want to go find a ring and It's gonna be hard to see here, but there's a little dimple. You want that dimple pointing up. And good thing with LSs too is that they run a thin ring pack, so sliding these rings on is cake in comparison to your small block Chevy or anything that has a 5/64 ring. You know, a big block Chevy stock replacement rings are much thicker and they're a lot harder to slide into place. So this is gonna be your moly top ring. You can see that's gonna be shiny along the side, and we'll check this ring just for a dimple or a chamfer. And this ring, it appears this moly top ring is completely flat and concentric, and it's not directional. So we're just gonna slide this ring in place. Again, it has no markings and it doesn't have any cuts, and its ring is completely flat. So after the rings are in place, you want to have gaps, and you want to set the ring gaps in opposite ends. So I'm definitely gonna take these gloves off. Can you get like a tiny screwdriver?
You want a pick?
Yeah, or a pick. So, thank you. So you want to set your ring gaps, and you're gonna set them in 4 different corners. So I'm gonna set this one up on this corner. You can line it up right here with the coating that's on the side of the piston. And then we'll spin this next one to the opposite end, 180 degrees from that. We'll spin it around. If you, as you know, putting the rings in, if you want to do this while you do that, that's fine. I like to do it last because in case you are, again, the second ring I'm putting over here. In case you are moving around with the piston, if you forget, you might move a ring or two and it might be a little bit off. So I like to do it last. Again, this is my preference. So all rings are at 4 different corners of the piston. We're going to do the cap here. Assembly loop. Yeah. So, alright, take the rod cap out. Make sure the surface is nice and clean. You get your bearing. On these bearings, there's no hole to worry about, so you just lock it in place. You know, make sure you order the right bearings for your application. This was all standard stock stuff, so you're gonna put a little assembly lube. A little bit more than that. Alright. Make sure there's no debris as you feel your finger around. Actually, I just felt a little gunk. And you just don't want no debris because this is going to get squished between your crank. And the last thing you want is to score your brand new cut crank, or if you did what we did, you know, a freshly clean crank. With your home polish job. So,
Few moments
later, I had this run quickly to my shop because I brought the wrong piston compressing ring for my piston compressor. So For this one, I have the 3 5/8 or 3 7/8 ring. It seems to fit much better. So what we're gonna do here is use a little engine oil, lubricate the inside of the ring a little bit, just so it helps things slide nicer. And compress it. Make sure the dot is pointing towards the front, and we want this to be straight. So you want to make sure your rod is going down straight. So squeeze, tap around the piston compressor. Now I don't have the camera pointing towards down the rod journal. I re-oiled the cylinder off camera. We'll redo it for the next hole. But you want to tap around. And again, the point that I wanted to say is you want the journal pointing straight down, perpendicular with the rod, so you can knock the piston in, and you don't have to worry about the rod hitting the crank. And then you come to the side and tap it in, especially if you don't have an extra hand helping you in the garage. So right now we're in, and I'll reach around.
That's mad sus.
Now I'll line up the rod with the crank. And we are in place. I have the main here. Now these are crack style rods, so they only go one direction and they marry a certain way. You do not want to mix and match. You want to make sure that you have it going the right direction. That's the last thing you need to do, is put it in the wrong way. You will turn your motor to scrap real quick. Slide your bearings in place. You'll lube this up. Make sure you have no debris. I need to clean the tip of that lube. We have just putting little specks into it, but make sure it's nice and smooth. And a good rule of thumb to go by is that the little cut, the lock for the bearing, matches with the other side, so they'll be facing each other from side to side. So that's how, when you're looking under there, you can match it. Alright, once you get in place, I'm just going to take it a little impact wrench, and we're just going to zap it into place. Yeah, we're not torquing it down, just zipping it hand tight. And since the motor is rotating on this side, we'll continue working on this bank. So we'll get the rod journal facing down, and we'll rinse and repeat. We'll do one more. Alright, we got 2 in, and next time we see this motor, we're gonna have them all in. So, and just like that, we got all 8 pistons in there. And now we're gonna start to torque down all the bolts for the rod bolts. So, much like the mains, there's going to be a torque yield process here, and it's 15 foot-pounds of torque and 75 degrees. This is a second gen, Gen 4 motor, so this has a later style rod bolts. So it's going to be 15 foot-pounds of torque, and then you add 75 degrees, and that's yield the bolt to 75 degrees. So again, for this application, all you really needed was a smaller torque wrench. For the head bolts, we're going to need the larger 1/2-inch drive. So yeah, every bolt when installed every bolt was oiled. So we put a little oil on the threads, and we're going to torque it down to 15 foot-pounds, and then we're going to add 75 degrees to the bolt. So and go over each one. I'll do a set of 4 at a time. I'm comfortable doing it this way. Maybe for some of you, you want to do 1 at a time, and that's fine as well. And just so you know, the size of the bolt is 11. So line this up at 0, and we're going to yield it. To 75.
That's awesome! That's awesome, bro. Yeah! Team girl! I said it! I said it! That is awesome. That is awesome. That is great. Where's Joy at? Yo,